We've all been there. You type in an email or some kind of assignment that you have to turn in, and you realize you used the wrong tone, you used the wrong words, and click, it's gone. You accidentally delete an entire paragraph of a report that you just spent hours working on. But before your heart can even start to race, you hit undo. The text reappears, and it's like your mistake never even happened. In our digital lives, we're surrounded by undo buttons. We have version histories for our documents. We have unsend features in messaging apps. We have infinite retries in video games. This technological safety net has fundamentally changed how we interact with tasks. It allows us to experiment, to be messy, and to take risks because the cost of a mistake is almost zero. We've grown accustomed to this idea that errors are irreversible. But as much as we love the convenience of the undo button, there's an uncomfortable reality that we face when we step away from our screens. In the physical world, and in the complexity of human relationships, there is no undo. Once a word is spoken, it's out in the air. Once a contract is signed, the ink is dry. And once a bridge is burned, only the ashes remain. Today, I want to talk about that gap, that space between our desire for reversibility and the irreversible nature of life, and how we can use a psychological tool called self-regulation to navigate that. A few years ago, I found myself in a situation that served as a very literal lesson in the permanence of error. I was assembling a new barbecue grill, no big deal. It was a nice piece, it had an attached side table on it. I had a sense of urgency when building it because it was going to be used that afternoon. I was moving fast, sort of following the instructions, but mostly just trying to get through the assembly. In my rush to get done, I made a fundamental error. I attached the side table backwards. It was facing the wrong direction. It was a mistake that didn't stop the grill from functioning, but it did completely alter how it was used. To fix it properly, I would have had to have disassembled the entire structure and rebuilt it. An undo button would have been really nice. But the effort required to undo my mistake far outweighed the time saved by rushing through the assembly process. So what I ended up doing, I just accepted it. I learned to live with this slightly awkward, somewhat inefficient grill. It became a minor, persistent annoyance, a physical reminder that my impulse to finish quickly had cost me long-term convenience. This experience stuck with me because it illustrates a universal truth. Many of our most frustrating life circumstances aren't caused by massive catastrophes, but by small, rushed decisions that we simply choose not to rebuild because the cost of fixing them is just too high. While a backward grill table is a minor annoyance, the unduless nature of our choices becomes much more significant when applied to our internal lives. Think about the words we use in moments of anger or moments of heated discussion. We've all experienced that split second of silence that immediately follows a sharp comment. The realization that you can't actually pull those words back into your mouth. They don't disappear. They shape reputations, they erode trust, and they alter the trajectory of our relationships. The same thing applies to larger life decisions. A career move made out of impulse rather than intention. A financial commitment made without foresight. or even the way we treat our health during periods of high stress. These aren't usually single event disasters. Instead, they're small lapses that accumulate over time. A series of poorly considered choices creates a life pattern. Over time, these patterns become much harder to change than a grill table is to fix. They form the foundation of our reality. And if we aren't careful, we can find ourselves living in a structure built entirely on accidental decisions. So if we can't rely on an external undo button, how do we protect ourselves from these irreversible errors? The answer lies in a psychological capability that sets human beings apart from much of the animal kingdom. It's called self-regulation. Self-regulation is the ability to monitor and manage your energy states, your emotions, your thoughts, and your behaviors in ways that are acceptable to you and produce positive results. You can think of it as an internal buffer or a pre-processing stage. It's the space between a stimulus, something happening to you, and your response, how you act. Instead of being a direct line from impulse to action, like a reflex, self regulation allows us to insert a moment of conscious intent. It doesn't mean we become robots without feeling. It means we stop acting on autopilot. It's the proactive way to correct course before the movement becomes permanent. It's the ability to look at that grill instruction manual and realize, wait, if I attach this here, it'll be facing the wrong way. To understand how to use self-regulation, we have to understand the two primary modes of our brain's processing. First, there's automatic processing. This is fast, it's instinctive, and it tends to be very emotional. It's what allows you to drive a car or follow a familiar route without thinking about every movement, or to react instantly when you get cut off in traffic. It's incredibly efficient, but it's also prone to errors in our judgment because it relies on patterns and shortcuts rather than on new information. In the context of our mistakes, automatic processing is the rushing part. It's the part that attaches the table backwards. Then there's effortful processing. That's a slower, more deliberate, and it requires a lot more mental energy. It's what you use when you're learning a new language or solving a complex math problem or trying to decide which house to buy. Effortful processing allows us to weigh consequences, consider alternatives, and align our actions with our long-term goals. A simple, a simple way to visualize this is through something we do every day on a computer. Copy and paste. When you copy and then paste, your brain isn't really thinking about the mechanics. It's on automatic, habitual movement. But if you were asked to manually select a specific set of string text, highlight it with pixel perfect precision, right click, navigate a menu, and ensure no extra characters were involved, that would be more effortful processing. The errors in our lives usually happen when we try to use automatic processing for tasks that actually require effortful processing. We use the autopilot of anger to handle an argument. We use the autopilot of impulse to handle a complex financial decision. The good news is that self-regulation isn't a fixed trait. You aren't born with just a certain amount of it. It's a skill, and it can be developed through practice. It's a lot like building muscle. Developing this skill requires us to lean into effortful processing repeatedly, even when we're tired, even when we're stressed. It involves two key components: mindful decision making and self acceptance. Mindful decision making means learning to step away from emotional turmoil. It's the ability to recognize when you're in that automatic state, when your heart is racing or your temper is rising, and consciously deciding to wait before responding. It involves asking yourself, is this action consistent with who I want to be or what I want to achieve? But you can't self regulate what you refuse to acknowledge. That leads to the second component, self acceptance. To improve our self regulation, we have to have an honest and even painful evaluation of our impulses. We need to be able to say, I'm prone to acting impulsively when I'm tired, or I tend to get defensive when I feel criticized. Without the foundation of self acceptance, we often fall into a cycle of shame. Shame undermines self regulation because it triggers more automatic defensive responses. True regulation starts with an honest, compassionate look at our own patterns. So, how does this look in practice? How do we move from the theory of self regulation to the reality of daily life? It starts with simple, scalable strategies. The first thing is implementing the pause. Before you send that heated text, before you make that impulsive purchase, before you commit to some new project, build in a mandatory delay. Pausing, even for a few seconds, can allow your brain to shift from automatic to effortful processing. And the second thing is remember your values. Set value reminders. We often lose our way because we forget what we stand for in the heat of the moment. Whether it's a physical note or some digital tool, keep your core values visible. When you're forced to check your actions against those values, you kind of create a natural friction that prevents reckless movement. The benefits of this practice are fantastic. You'll notice improved relationships because you're responding rather than reacting. You'll see better long-term outcomes in your career, in your finances, because your decisions are grounded in stability. And perhaps the most important thing you'll experience is reduced regret. We may never have a literal undo button for our lives. We'll continue to make mistakes. We'll continue to attach some tables to the wrong sides of our projects. But by cultivating self-regulation, we can ensure that when we do make those mistakes, they're the kind we can live with. And more importantly, we can build a life characterized not by accidental reactions, but by intentional choices. That's it for today. If you found this helpful, consider subscribing for more on mind, meaning, and purpose. And thanks for watching. Take good care.
Mama always said you should read your Bible. Mama always said you should pray every night. Sitting here thinking my hands are idle. Sitting here wishing things would turn out right. This golden fool is losing ground. Those golden dreams don't come around.